3535 Germantown Avenue. We are here once again, Hotep, the Molei Kete Asante Institute. I am Aaron Smith, the rapping professor, and I have the privilege and the honor and the distinct pleasure to introduce today's speaker. Make sure your phones are silenced. And I thought to myself earlier about the great debate. Many of you recall the great debate with the master teacher, John Henry Clark and Mary Lefkowitz and others. And does anybody know what year that was? Just offhand, if you think to yourself, what year do you think that was? 1991. It's almost the late 80s, right? We're talking 34 years ago. Because for some of us, these things are present in our mind, all these moments in Afrocentric history. We just think that certain things have been settled. We think about UNESCO and we think of Diop and we say these are no-brainers, right? So when we hear about Kevin Hart, recently, had the issue where he was talking about the African origins, of Egypt, and they attacked him. Because when the lie is being promoted and propagandized thoroughly in recent times, sometimes those of us with a longer memory, Dr. Asante always says we got to start with chronology. So in the tech world, we say we need updates. If you got a phone, if you don't get your update, your phone don't work right. So today we have the honor and the privilege and the pleasure of introducing to some, because some people weren't born when that debate happened. So there's some young people that are going to hear this information for the first time through, the vessels like Dr. Asante. And for others, this serves as an update. So the Arab intellectuals' assault on African Egypt. I bring to you the one, the only, Dr. Molei Kete Asante, bringing us our update.
Hotep, brothers and sisters, how y'all doing? Wow, this is beautiful. This is beautiful. We have a wonderful audience here, wonderful audience on YouTube. We are in for a beautiful, wonderful day. I want to thank the rapping professor, Dr. Aaron Smith, Jabali Ade, for his fine introduction. Always gives me inspiration. The brother's always ready. He's you just put him on, just say, brother, just talk, and he can always talk. And it's a wonderful thing. I really want to appreciate him so much. I want to appreciate all of you. And certainly one of the things I want to appreciate and say this, I meant to say it the last time I spoke here, and that is to honor Yanenga Asante for creating this idea, for giving us this idea for this institute. And we have a film that has been made about this, a video that's been made about the institute, and at some time we'll play it at the end, so you'll see it. So I just wanted to let us know about that, because that's very important. I think that one of the things there's so many topics to talk about, and certainly in the Arab intellectual assault on Black Egypt, or ancient African Egypt, is an important topic, and I'm going to talk about that. I'm going to give you a full briefing on that question, but I can't not. Reverend Joe Williams knows this. I cannot just ignore what's going on now. You know what I'm saying? I mean, where we live, I just can't ignore that. The Trump inordinate attack, I call it an inordinate attack, on the South African government. There's so many things happening each day, but the attack on the South African government by actually expelling the ambassador for South Africa to Washington, expelling that person while offering American citizenship to the apartheid-minded whites who do not want to live in a government run by Africans. It's not only pathetic and contradictory, but morally repulsive. Although about 70,000, did you know when they first announced that 70,000 white people in South Africa out of a total of about 3 million, 70,000 signed up and said, I really want to go to America. And it's very interesting to me, and it's reprehensible to me as an African in America that this government wants to keep Haitians, Venezuelans, Mexicans, Asians, and even some Cubans out of this country, but they want the apartheid-minded whites to come. So it tells you something. It gives you an idea of what's going on. You see, the other thing that happened is that, and this is so many things, but the African American Museum in Washington, I've been to that museum. That museum is the second or third most visited museum in Washington, D.C. If you haven't been there, you got to go. The National African American Museum is indeed a profound representation of the history of African people in this country. It shows you the very fabric of this country, the origins of this country, particularly in terms of what has happened, the genocide of the Native Americans, the enslavement of the Africans, and so on. And then the Holocaust Museum is also in this, because the Holocaust Museum in Washington, D.C., they would say, well, that's a Jewish museum. The other one, that's the Native American Museum. That's the African American Museum. And Trump is not smart enough to study and learn from history. And then he's dumb enough to think that he can order a dismantling of facts about the oppression of African people. But let me tell you something. Our history is not just written in books, and it is not just written in exhibitions. It is in our experiences and our hearts, and it is unerasable. Let me tell you that. This is not, you cannot, this notion about what is improper ideology. That's another term you use. We don't want any improper ideology. Well, the most improper ideology in the United States of America is white racial supremacy. That's the most improper ideology. So Trump and the MAGA group, they would want to create a false history. African and Native Americans are woven into the fabric of the national experience. We are fundamental to it. And the real improper ideology is what I call the neo-techno oligarchic imperialism. Can you imagine that? I mean, we couldn't imagine a few years ago that an American president said, I'm going to take Greenland. I'm just going to take it. I don't want to use violence, but I'm going to take it. I'm going to take Panama Canal. I'm going to take it. He may be thinking of taking everything, but someone said the other day, why not just give independence to the people who live in Washington, D.C.? Let them have senators. Why not just go to Puerto Rico and make Puerto Rico a state? But you just want to be an imperialist. You see, back in the old days, we say imperialism was bad. Now you got MAGA people who think that imperialism is good. There's nothing good about that. You cannot believe in a hierarchical situation in which you believe you can just take over other people's country and over other people's land. That day and that era is gone. And even if it happened here, there would be people in this country, I'm sure, who would object to it, and there will be people who will be fighting against it because it is not correct. This neo-techno, as I call it, oligarchic imperialism is another form of saying it's all right for Russia to invade Ukraine. It's all right for China to invade Taiwan. It was all right for Germany to invade Czechoslovakia and Poland during the Nazi regime. That's the attitude. And this attitude is a very negative attitude about the world. And it really it creates this notion that there are those people who have a hierarchical view of the world, and they think that their hierarchy, their view of the world is a proper view of the world, and it's not the proper view of the world. We cannot go that direction. We have to remember that the moral ideals of this country have always been led by the oppressed. The African American population, the civil rights movement, we are the people who gave moral direction. Martin Luther King and Malcolm X and Marcus Garvey gave moral direction to this country. Fannie Lou Hamer gave moral direction to this country. And that's why she said, is this America? You know, you remember how she said, this is America? Is this America? Because her idea of America was a different America. It was an America where people were working and fighting, trying to be better, trying to create a more perfect union for everybody in this multicultural, multi-ethnic, pluralistic society. That's the way it was. And I know that there were some African-American people. Yes, there were. I saw some on TV the other day who voted for MAGA. I'm saying, who are these people? You know, Paul Laurence Dunbar, one of our great poets, once said, this is the price I paid just for one riotous day. Years of regret and grief, sorrow without relief. And he said this because in a personal and in a collective sense, you can vote and then you can say, oh, we saw, I didn't know he was going to do all that. One of the things we know, however, is that, and this is true because it comes directly from one of our another great poet, and that's Maya Angelou. You may write me down in history with your twisted, bitter lies. You may trod me in the very dirt, but still, like dust, I'll rise. Brothers and sisters, have no fear. We are just watching. We're going to set back. And this one, we got to set back and see what the majority of the people in this country are going to do. We've done our marching. We now want to see whether or not this democracy can be saved. So I just want, that's the introduction. I just wanted to give you that introduction because I got so much to talk to you about Arab intellectuals' assault on African Egypt. But there's so much going on. This is so much in the society that people are talking about and doing. So let me just preface this conversation for all of our people, all those who are listening around the world as well. This is not an attack on Arab people. I think this should be very clear. And coming after Ramadan, y'all need to be clear on this. This is not an attack on Arab people. This is not even an attack on, I'm not attacking the Islamic religion. That's not what this is about. This is something else. This is an attack on those individuals who have tried to push an ideology that somehow takes the ancient Egyptian civilization away from Africa and from Black people. That is what this is about. I know that there must be some, I haven't found them yet, and I'll say this later. There must be some Arab intellectuals who say, you know what? They're lying, but we don't have them yet. At least I don't know them yet. I've had one or two people to write to me, Arab people to write to me and to say that they want to explain some things and so on. But their explanations are always, in a way, a hierarchical notion about their relationship to Black people. So that's a big problem. So let's now go in and look at this conversation. So I see what is going on is a form of what they call cultural imperialism. Now, cultural imperialism is a form of hierarchy. It's domination of knowledge about land. It's you come in and you take over somebody's land and then you start writing about it like it's yours. That's cultural imperialism. It's an explanation without facts. You just come in and you say, well, this is the way it is, and this is the way it always was. Now, Americans can understand this. So I'm gonna make it very clear to you. In the United States of America, before Europeans got here, there were people who lived here in the area where we are right now, this avenue that's right outside this building. That avenue was a trail for the Lenape people. The Lenape people lived here. That was their trail from the interior all the way to the Delaware River that would take them out to the ocean. They lived here. That was their land, right? So now you come and you occupy their land and you assume they never were here. We would look at that and say, that's kind of weird. Now, Europeans, they know they were here. So they're not going to tell you that Europeans have always been in Philadelphia. No, they won't say always been in the land that's Philadelphia. They won't tell you that because they are wise enough to know by now that there's enough history and facts, and there are enough people, even Europeans, who would say, hey, no, you can't claim the Lenape's land that you were here before the Lenape. You can't, there's no way you can do that, you see? So you can't make an explanation without facts. And you can't dominate knowledge about the land by trying to rewrite the history. So let me give you chronology. The rapping professor said I did chronology. I love chronology. Menes, a black man from Upper Egypt. Now remember, Egypt, Upper Egypt is south, is the south. It's southern Egypt. This is very, you need to know that. Upper Egypt is southern Egypt. Lower Egypt is toward the Mediterranean. And the reason it's lower is because Upper Egypt is where the Nile River flows down to the Mediterranean. It doesn't flow from the Mediterranean down south. It flows from the south to the north. It comes out of the mountains of Uganda and Rwanda and that whole complex and flows through Sudan and through Egypt. And it comes also out of the mountains of Ethiopia through the Abai River. That's how the Nile River is formed. Comes from the hilly, the high areas. It comes from Lake Tano. And that's high, and it goes down to the Mediterranean. So that's why they call northern Egypt Lower Egypt. They call Upper Egypt the South. Now that confuses some people. And some people get it twisted. And maybe some of these Arab intellectuals got it twisted. And they say, oh, well, civilization came from Upper Egypt. Wait a minute, that's true, but it's not meaning north. It's south. Civilization came from the south to the north. It came from that region and then went down to the Mediterranean. 3400 BC, Menes, the great king, unites the different clans and seapots along the Nile River, 42 of them, and make one nation. The first time we have a nation in the world. We made a combination of all these kingdoms. That was done by a black king named Menes, whose name should be in everybody's book. All children in elementary schools should learn about Menes, but I guarantee you they haven't heard of him. That's the name. That's a name there. At the very beginning of history. And history is the beginning of writing. At the very beginning of writing is African. An African leader who unites so many kingdoms and make one. That's a historical fact. Nobody denies that, right? Then around 2700 BCE, before the Christian era, you get Imhotep. We have a school a couple of miles from here called Imhotep Charter School. Named for this man, Imhotep. 2,700 years before Jesus Christ, Imhotep builds the first pyramid, a black man, Imhotep. You think that Imhotep's name is in the books of the children, the Arab children? It's not in the name of the European children. It's not even in the name of a lot of the African children and the African people and African nations. Imhotep, the most significant, multidimensional, influential person in antiquity is Imhotep. He was a physician. He was a poet. He was an architect, an engineer, builder of the first pyramid. Why isn't he? Why are you going to go to Homer and say the Iliad is somehow so significant? The Iliad was almost 2,000 years later. But 2,700 years before Jesus Christ ever walked on the earth, a black man was venerated. Imhotep. It's very important to remember these dates. 1450 BCE, Ma'at Kare. Ma'at Kare Hatshepsut, the first woman that we know of who ruled so powerfully in her own right. Hatshepsut, whose royal name was Ma'at Kare. The spirit of Ma'at is with God. This is 1,450 years before Jesus. Almost 2,000 years, more than 2,000 years before Muhammad. This black woman, Hatshepsut, is ruling. That is, I'm telling you, neither Ma'at Kare, Menes, or Imhotep, their names do not appear in the books of the Arab children or the Europeans. Why? Because they're black. And they know they're black. They understand that they're black. They understand who these people were, you see? And then look at this, 1400 BC, 1400 years before the Christian era. There is the greatest conquering king who has ever lived on the earth, Thutmose III. The greatest conquering king. You probably, this is some of you, first time you've ever heard of Thutmose III. What made him such a great king as a conquering king? It's the number of campaigns he led his armies into battle and came back alive. That's how they measured it. And so what did they tell you? Alexander the Great is the greatest conquering king. How many battles did he lead and come back alive? 7. He led his campaigns. Because back in those days, you couldn't be like a Trump or a Putin, just sit in your office and send people out to war. You gotta put on your guard. You gotta go out there and fight. And when you come back, people say, okay, this is a person who's led us in the battle and we won and come back. 7 times Alexander did that. And people say he was the greatest. But that's because they discount the African Thutmose III. He went into battle 17 times and came back alive. Think about that. 10 times longer, more than Alexander, Thutmose III. 1,400 years before Christ. Ramses II, around 1,200 years before Jesus Christ. Ramses II, the greatest builder who ever lived in the ancient world, built more monuments, more temples than anybody. One of the most significant figures in history, Ramses II. There were several Ramses. And some of you have been to Kemet with me, and you know this. Brother Carlton and I, we traveled there too. And we know, we've seen all this. Ramses II. And I just want to say this because some people out there saying he's just talking like this. He's never been to Egypt. Yeah, I've been to Egypt 12 or 14 times. And also, my ancestry is from Sudan and Nigeria. So I take the Nile River as part of my heritage. All right. So I'm willing to debate with anybody about that and discuss that. That's another thing. But look at this. In 714 BCE, Pianki or PA reunites the whole Nile Valley, all the way from the city of Napata, which is in Sudan today, all the way from Napata to the Mediterranean, unites the whole thing. That was 700 years before Jesus Christ. And then Taharka, the great king Taharka, who, if you go to Kemet today, and we'll talk about Kemet in a minute, you go there today, you will see the statue of Taharka. He was considered right along with Ramses II, one of the great kings of ancient Egypt, Taharka. All these are black people I'm talking about. I'm not talking about, no, all these are black people. The further back in the history of Egypt you go, the blacker the people are, of course. But that's not what I'm talking. I'm just saying that these were all African people. This is the chronology. This is a basic chronology. Now, let's understand, what was the name of Egypt for the ancient people? The Hebrew people called it Mizraim. Mizraim. That was the and who was Mizraim? He was a son of Ham, who was the son of Noah. And you can read that in the Bible, Genesis 12, right? And then Mizraim, Egypt was called Mizraim because it was, and this is the Bible too, in Psalms 105, because Egypt was called the land of Ham. The land of Ham. Ham was the son of Noah. Remember that, right? He was the son of Noah. Now, what do the Arabs call Egypt? They didn't call it Egypt. They call it Mizra. Mizra is the Arab word for Egypt. Mizra. Mizra is also, it's the same, from the same root as Mizraim. That's because in the Arabic, they recognize that it was the land of Ham. Mizraim was the son of Ham. You see? So this is it. That's what they understand. So the sons of Ham were Mizra, Cush, Punt, and Canaan. Those were the sons of Ham. This is according to the Bible, right? Now, what did the Greeks call it? The Greeks call it Egyptos. Egyptos. Now, it's just very interesting. The Greeks call it Egyptus. The Hebrew call it Mizraim. The Arabs call it Mizra. What did the people call themselves? You know, this is very clear to me. What did they call themselves? I'll tell you what they call themselves. This is what they call themselves. This is how they wrote it. And in the Chicam is the word I use for the language of Kemet. Some people use the word Merunetra. And the reason I don't, and I use Merunetra sometimes, but the reason I don't use Merunetra because Merunetra means the divine words. That's what that means. It means the words of God. You know, Netra is what is God, you see? And Netra is always identified as like a flag. That's where the flags come from Africa. You know, the flags people wear around, this is the American flag, they walk around with flags. That was the image of God in ancient Kemet, you see? That's why when people went into battle, when Tutmosis III or Ramses went into battle or Taharka went into battle, they had the flag of the deity with them, you see? And that flag became identified as the name of the god. You see, it could be Amen, could be Ra. You see, that's and so in the writing, and when they said Necha, they wrote it like a flag. So Meru Necha means divine word, so the words of God. But Chikam, this is something that chematologists are using more and more. And I'll tell you about chematologists. Now, these are African scholars who study ancient Kemet. We use the word, we say that when we talk about Kemet, we are not using metal. We're not saying metal natural. We are saying Chikam because the chi is a prefix, you see, to the language, and it's almost like in Zulu we say isiZulu. We say for Swahili we say Kiswahili. You see, Kiswahili meaning the language of Swahili is different from the people of Swahili. isiZulu is different from the people of Zulu. If you're going to say the people of Zulu, you say Amazulu. You see, so this prefix is important. So what we've said is that Chi Kemet, so Chi Kam meaning the language of Kemet. All right, but what did they call it? They call it Kemet. Kemet, and that's what's written right there. It's written. You can see it. That is Kemet. That's the way they wrote the name of their country, Kemet, and they start with Kim, and they show you the M with the owl, and then they give you the T, and then they give you the symbol that represents either a country or a city. And that symbol, you still see that symbol on maps today for a city. You look at open your people don't do analog anymore. They don't open maps. They do just digital. But you usually have maps, and you can see this represents a city. It represents a country. They were represented a place, a region. That came from Kemet, and this means the black country. That's what that means. The first letter. The first letter is itself. This is Kim right here. Kim. This is Kim. Means black, like charcoal. That's what it means. So the black country, and nobody who knows anything about the ancient language will differ from that. So we start here. Now, let me show you. So now the other thing is people say, well, Egypt is not in Africa. Well, the reason I got this map, and I could have given you a larger map and showed you other countries like Ethiopia and so on, all connected to this, right? This is a map of Egypt and Sudan. Shows you Sudan and Egypt, right? If Sudan is in Africa, then Egypt is in Africa. They all, and in fact, the Nile River runs through only one continent, and that's Africa. It doesn't run through any other continent. It doesn't run through North America. It does not in Philadelphia, Chicago. Doesn't run through here. Doesn't run through South America or Asia. Doesn't run through Europe. They got their own rivers, the Danube and the Rhine. But it doesn't run through any of it runs through Africa. 4,200 miles through Africa, the Nile River. And then, as I said to you earlier, the Blue Nile, the Abe, coming out of the mountains of Ethiopia, gives it its energy and power, empowers it down to the Mediterranean. That is a historical, scientific fact. You can't deny that. So then the question becomes, why is there so much controversy? And why have the Arabs taken up a battle that the Europeans took up and lost? You know, it's like, wait a minute. Did some other people have this argument with African scholars in African history, and didn't they lose it? Yeah, they did. And I'll show you how they lost it. But then the Arabs have taken it up, and I'll tell you why they took it up, all right? But let's look at the invasions of Kemet. Kemet has always been attractive to outsiders. It always was attractive. It was a place of scholarship. It was a place where you had the first universities. It was a place where you had the great temples. And Dr. Jabali Ade and I walked through them. We've been there, seen it. We know what we're talking about. And it was invaded around 1500 BC by the Hyksos. And these were the people who came out of Asia. They came and they just sat in certain areas of Lower Egypt. And they sat there and they began to take over that territory. Much like, let me tell you what it's like. It was like the white Americans who sat in Texas when Texas was Mexico. And they left Arkansas and Louisiana and settled in Texas and sat there in Texas until they thought that Texas belonged to them. And then you remember the Alamo. And then they took over the Alamo. And then the Mexican government in Mexico City had to send up troops, Santa Anna, to kick them out of the Alamo because this is still Mexico. Same thing happened to the Hyksos. The Hyksos took over part of Egypt, and they were there until they were defeated. And when they were defeated by the dynasty of the Kamoses and Amos and kicked out, then, of course, Egypt continued its history. But in 671, the Assyrians come from Assyria, what is now around Syria. They come and they defeat Egypt, and they capture the city of Menepher, the city that is named Memphis. That city was captured by them, and then they defeated it during the time of Taharka, right? But then in 525, it regained its power. Kemet did, and then the Persians came, the Iranians. They came in 525 BC, 500 years before Jesus Christ. The Iranians, you would call them that today. The Persians came over and they defeated the great centers of Egypt, destroyed lots of the monuments, everything. But they didn't destroy everything. So, I mean, they destroyed a lot of things, but not. But not all was destroyed. A lot was destroyed. They destroyed. They went into every aspect of Kemet. But then it was rebuilt, and then after it was rebuilt, Alexander, the Macedonian, came, and Alexander came in 333 BC. And he wins in Kemet, and he established his own dynasty. That is, a dynasty is a family of kings. He put in power a man by the name of Ptolemy. And Ptolemy and his descendants ruled Egypt for 300 years. That's all the way down to Cleopatra. Those are the invasions. But remember, in 30 BC, Augustus, who had been Octavius, he defeated Cleopatra, and Mark Antony defeated their armies because Cleopatra was dilly-dallying with Mark Antony, and they decided they're going to, be against Rome, and Rome came in, defeated them, took over Egypt, and after that period of time, the Romans basically left Egypt to its own devices, but they had certain people inside Egypt working in Egypt. And then the African people, the Black people of Egypt, tired of the Roman overlords, asked the Arabs under General El Az, who had just defeated Jerusalem, would he come into Egypt and help the African armies throw out the Romans. That's how the Arabs got there. Let me explain this. Arabs know this. There's no large pocket of Arabs in Africa before this time. They come from Arabia. That's why you have Arabia. That's why you got Saudi Arabia. It's where they come from, Arabia. They're desert people. They're not riverine people. The riverine people, the people along the river, these are the Egyptians, the ancient Egyptians, the black people. They're river people. You see? And it's one of the big problems these days is that the Arab government of Egypt wants to put the black people in the desert. They want to do it. They try to do it in Sudan too. The same thing. There's an assault on Africa that is inordinate, that is persistent, and based on the notion of inferiority of Africans, which is, of course, a stupid notion, but that is what it's based on. And it's hard to get it out of the people who have, in a sense, conquered you. They conquered the land, and so now they want to write about the land, and they want to say that. But that's 600. When do they come? They came 639 years after Christ. 639 AD, we call it. Not in the BCs. We don't have the Arabs coming in the BCs before the Christian era. They came 639 years after. And that's when the Romans were defeated, and the Arabs said, this is a nice land here. It's fertile. They got all kinds of pomegranates and all kinds of fruits and vegetables and fish and everything here. It's sunlight all the time and, cool evenings in the night. Let's just stay here. And that's our situation. So General Az, that's his name, A.S., that was his name, General Az. He set up the city of Cairo. Cairo was not an ancient African creation. We can't claim that. We didn't set up Cairo. It's a nice, big, beautiful city today, but we Africans didn't build it. It was built by the Arabs as a fortress first to protect them from the people, from the masses, you see. That's how it was built. But the cities, the ancient cities, like Waset, this is an ancient city. Syene. Ancient cities. Memphis. And many other cities. Great cities of Kemet. Many of these cities were destroyed by the various invasions. But Waset today is still there. And what do they call Waset? They call it Luxor. If you go there today, they call it Luxor. That's an Arab name, but that's not what the Africans call it. They call it Waset. And everywhere on the walls of the temples, you see the name of the city. That's what is so crazy. The name is right there. Why are you going to change it? The people say Waset. And you come in and say, no, I'm going to call it Thebes. That's what the Greeks called it first. The Thebes was what the Greeks called it, the city of Thebes, the city of 1,000 gates. The Thebes. But no, it wasn't Thebes, it was Waset. And after the Greeks and the Romans, then the Arabs came and they said, no, we're not going to call it Waset, we're not going to call it Thebes, we'll call it Luxor. You see? And they got one in Las Vegas called a Hotel Luxor, you see. But then the destruction of the monuments, the attack on the Coptic Christian community, because by this time, by 630, you also have Christians who were of Greek origin, because you had the Greek government for a long time before the Romans. Greek and Roman people became Christians, as well as Africans. They were Christians. You remember, as you heard of Hypatia, African woman who was the first female mathematician that we know about in history, who was killed, who was actually killed. She was a mathematician, but she was not a Christian. She was killed by the Christians. This was a black woman mathematician, Hypatia. Read about her. This one and what they have tried to do, what some people try to do, is to make out like she was not black. And in fact, they have some images online of black people killing her, right? Dragging this white woman, like one of those symbolic examples, dragging the woman by the hair. No, it was a black woman being killed by people who were Christians. That's what her patient was, because they thought the mathematical formulations and equations were somehow mystical and superstitious. So they say, we got to kill this woman. But read up on her, so you'll have that. Okay, now let's go now. The European fascination with Kemet, and I know my time is getting away, but I'm going to try to finish this off quickly. You need to know this, that at one time the Europeans, they would get the mummies from Egypt, and they would eat the mummy. This was called mummy dust. Yeah, you read about it. It's all mummy dust. You would get mummy dust. You get to grind up the mummies, and you would eat the mummy dust. This was a fascination in Europe, actually, for a long time, and when they didn't understand Kemet, but by 1792, 1793, there was a man by the name of Volney, who was a count, a French count, and he went to Kemet, and he wrote a book called Ruins of Empire. And he that was 1793. And then in 1799, Napoleon went to Kemet. And when he got to Kemet, what he did was he didn't stay very long, because his soldiers found the Rosetta Stone. The Rosetta Stone was a stone that had 3 different scripts on it. And one of the scripts happened to be Greek. The other 2 were Egyptian scripts. And so that's how they began to try to figure out what is the meaning of the ancient Egyptian language, by looking at the Greek and looking at the Egyptian and trying to compare and contrast and so forth and so on. That's a whole nother lecture. But at any rate, Champollion was the person who was the decipherer. He deciphered that. And that was around 1822. So that's just some history here. But let me tell you what Volney said, because Volney was important. You can't probably read this, but he says the Ethiopians, says Lucian, he was quoting a Roman, were the first who invented, listen to this, they were the first who invented the science of the stars. They were the first who invented the science of the stars and gave names to the planets, not at random and without meaning, but descriptive of the qualities which they conceived them to possess. And it was from them that this art passed, still in an imperfect state, to the Egyptians. No, wait a minute. This is why John Jackson was able to write his book. He wrote several books. One was the Introduction to African Civilization. And then he talked about the Christ before the Christ. But he also knew, John Jackson also knew, that Ethiopia was the mother of Kemet. The Ethiopians were the soil, and not only, and this Lucian says it. He said we have the strong, and then what Volney says, because he traveled over this region. He said we have the strongest reason to believe that the country neighboring to the tropic was the cradle of the sciences, and of consequence that the first learned nation was a nation of blacks, for it is incontrovertible that by the term Ethiopians the ancients meant to represent a people of black complexion, thick lips, and woolly hair. That's who's saying this? The Frenchman, Volney. When is he saying it? 1792 and 1793. He's writing it. He said this. He said the ancients said it before me. That's right. But this is the thing I'm telling you, that the Europeans, they got this. But the Arab intellectuals, they don't have it, because they still want to put that hierarchy of race on the Africans. Diodorus says, and this is one other thing he says, Diodorus says of the Thebans. Who are the Thebans? The people of what city? There you go, boy. I love the MKA Institute audience. You guys are right. Wasset, the Thebans. Diodorus says of the Thebans, the Ethiopians conceived themselves to be of greater antiquity than any other nation. They suppose themselves also to be the inventors of divine worship, of festivals, of solemn assemblies, of sacrifices, and every other religious practice. They affirm that the Egyptians are one of their colonies. Egypt is a colony of Ethiopia. And Ethiopia is black. This is one of their colonies. Diodorus says this, and he's right around 60 years before the Christian era. All right, I'm going to go quickly now. Here's what Volney says. He found, this is his conclusion. He says, there in Egypt, a people now forgotten, discovered while others were yet barbarians, the elements of the arts and sciences, a race of men now rejected from society for their sable skin and frizzled hair, founded on the study of the laws of nature, those civil and religious systems which still govern the universe. That's Africans. It's not Arabs. It's African people. He saw that. He understood this. Herodotus, book 2, 5th century BC. He said the Colchians were like the Egyptians because they had black skin and woolly hair. The word for black skin in Greek is melanchroas, meaning black skin, like you say melanin, like you say Melanesia. Melanin. Melanchroas means black. The word for white skin is leucochros. Leucochros. The word for brown skin is phrenochros. So it didn't say, so in the Greek, when Herodotus is writing, he doesn't use phrenochros or leucochros. He said that these people they're melanchros, they have black skin. That's what he says. You can't defute that. Now, what do we get with what I'm telling you about the Arab intellectuals? We get the selling of ancient Egypt. That's what we get. It's the selling of ancient Egypt. I've been there enough to know that that's what's going on. The philosophy of downplaying the monumental history, the assumption that the creators were inferiors, and the historical neglect of the pyramids. This was all going on by the Arabs long before the Europeans got there. And I'm saying this to you so you understand history. The preservation of the monuments of Kemet were not done by the Arabs. Let me say this again. The famous Egyptian museum that was in Cairo, that the one that now they're building near Giza, which is going to open this year, that the beginning of that was founded in 1858 by a Frenchman named Auguste Mariette. Auguste Mariette, 1858. But the Arabs have been there since 639 AD. You think they were preserving the monuments of ancient Black Africa? No. It's when the French and the British took over that Mariette, a Frenchman whose statue used to be right in the lawn of the museum. Before you go into the Cairo Museum, you look, there's a white guy there, big statue of him, almost as tall as Ramses' statue. His Mariette. He preserved the record of the Africans, not the Arabs. They didn't do it. And they had it at that time, they had it for over 1,000 years. No preservation. In fact, they were destroying as much as they wanted to. But you know what happened? Modern Egyptian independence from Britain in 1952, when they had the overthrow of the government and Nasser came to power, they saw ancient Egypt as a commercial component of their independence. We can make some money. We can have tourist industry. We can have people to come and we can sell these things. We can make these things and so on. And one of the greatest promoters, if it were in the days of the circus, you would call him a ringleader, was a man by the name of Zahi Hawass. He studied Greek and Roman architecture in school, and then at the University of Alexandria, and then he came to Penn. He had come to Temple, he would have learned something. He came to Penn and studied antiquities, archaeology at Penn. And he came and he finished Penn in 1987, a year before we started our PhD in Africology at Temple. He completed his work in 1987 and he went back to Egypt and they appointed him the director of antiquities. And then he became minister of tourism and antiquities. Put them together. That is the key to Zahi Hawass. Now, what you do is what do you do? And then in 2011 they fired him, and then they now brought him back in some capacity. They brought him back because he was one of the greatest promoters of bringing white Americans to Egypt. He had all kinds of activities in the pyramids. You can go in there and stay all night and have a fire and he had all kinds of things, seances and you can do everything. He was largely responsible for the tourism industry in Egypt. That's Zahi Hawass. And I have a story about him by a sister here in Philadelphia whose name was Helen Blue. And Helen Blue, we had a demonstration against him when he came to the Franklin Museum. And Helen Blue was in our group, and Helen Blue was a journalist. And she went up to Zahi Hawass, following him around inside the museum as he was trying to explain Tutankhamun. And she said, was he black? Was he black? Dr. Hawass, was he black? Was he black? And then he was so tired of her questioning him. He said, yes, he was black. So what? And kept on. But now he denied. Now he wants to deny it. That's the Arab intellectual. He did it. That was because what he wanted to do was to convince white Americans that he knew more than anybody else about ancient Kemet. And he did that successfully. There are all kinds of shows on TV of him going down into tombs and look what I've discovered and so forth and so on. There's so much in Kemet that has not yet been uncovered. But Zahi he is a colorful character with lots of vigor, but has no understanding of how ancient Egypt fits into African history. You'll never hear him give a lecture on ancient Egypt as a part of Africa. He will not do that. And I can't show my Diop. I have a thing on Diop, but I can't show it. So, but here's what I call it. He channels an Arab Indiana Jones. That's his style. Now, here are the statues of King Tutankhamun, and I've seen King Tutankhamun. I've seen these statues of him, and they're black. And in fact, one of the interesting things is that it's a hard thing for guides, Egyptian guides, Arab guides, to try to explain why they're black. They have all kinds of reasoning about the black. Well, we don't know. Maybe they didn't have enough paint to do such and such. No, 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 no. The answer, as I always say to them when they're talking to me about it, I said, he's black because he was black. There's not that. That's all you can say about it. He was black because he was black. But I call it performative Egyptology. They don't claim to be Africologists. These Arab intellectuals, they don't claim to be Africanists. They don't claim to be Pan-Africanists. They don't even claim to be chematologists. They have taken on the name that the Europeans had, and that they call themselves Egyptologists. And they call themselves Egyptologists when actually what they are is people who really do not necessarily appreciate the fact that Misr in Arabic, their notion of Misr was a black civilization. Now, who are the triple threat? There are actually four of them. I'm sorry, the triple threat. Hawass, Mustafa Waziri, Khalid El Inani, and Wassim El Sisi. I added El Sisi. That's why I have triple. It should be there four. And the reason I added Wassim El Sisi is because of this. He wrote talking about Afrocentrists, and particularly me, Sheikh Anta Diop, and he put Malcolm X in there for some reason. He said the movement claims that those currently living within Egypt are essentially imposters, and that ancient Egypt was originally a black civilization. That's what he says. That's the charge against the Afrocentrists and the Africologists, that we say ancient Egypt was originally a black civilization. Well, that is true. It was. So there's no problem about that. And I call this thinking backwards. Interesting. Here's what he says. He says artwork found on sandals shows imagery of an ancient Egyptian pharaoh holding up a black warrior, which represents his authority over Egypt's enemies and contradict Afrocentrist claims. No, it doesn't. The fact that you have a German holding up a French soldier or killing a French soldier doesn't claim anything except there's warfare. If you have a Russian holding a Ukrainian by the neck, doesn't show anything. They're both from the same, well, you would say from the same culture. Ukrainian, Russians, the same. You see what I'm saying? So I'm basically this is a problem, and it's a problem of backward thinking. There's no reason for us to think that El Sisi really knows exactly what he's talking about. The facts of ancient Kemet, these are these facts. Kemet was an African civilization, not a European civilization, not an Arab civilization. Kemet is not in the Middle East. It is on the continent of Africa. Kemet is a child of Cush, its mother civilization. Conclusion: the only imposters are those who claim that ancient Kemet, the land of black people, was Arab land. That is just like saying that the Europeans who conquered America, North and South, are the original owners of the land and culture of those two continents. Arab intellectuals who know the truth are unable to speak for fear of being ostracized by rabid racist types like Wassim El Sisi. I've yet to hear an Arab intellectual tell the truth about the African origin of ancient Kemet. Humanity, Homo sapiens, originate in Africa. Ancient Kemet, just like Kush in Libya and Tunisia, was the land of black humans. I thank y'all very much. Thank you.
Lisa asked if you could tell us who the name of the female mathematician is from ancient Egypt.
The female mathematician was Hypatia, Hypatia, Hypatia. Okay, so you have any comments? Reverend Joe Williams, how you doing, sir? And Sister Yesenia.
Thank you, Dr. Asante. I am in the Smithsonian Institute. I am in the African American Museum in Washington. Now I know why the Lord is keeping me here. Everybody else is dead but me. Which is in December. Keep the story straight.
Yes, sir.
Just change the story on it.
Yes, they do.
And last but not least, my wife and I in the group went to Egypt in 1990. Our tour guide I asked the tour guide, I said, who built the pyramids? And our tour guide said he didn't know. I said, wait a minute.
And he's the tour guide.
When they come in here, you're going to lie to me.
That's right.
Get me another.
You need a new tour guide. That's right.
They have no trouble lying.
That's right.
So thank you, Doc. God bless you.
Thank you very much. Part of the problem is that they don't, the guides don't really know. The guides are not, they call themselves Egyptologists, but they're really guides. Just like you train somebody to do the Independence Park, and they don't necessarily know the deep history of George Washington, but they know how to tell you what this building is and what that building is and that kind of thing and so forth. Yes, ma'am. Please.
Thank you so much, Professor, for this talk. I would like that you explain me a little bit more about this idea of the power of word, because when I was reading, the first I had to learn about Spinoza before that, African philosophies, and this idea of nature and how the power of nature to create like a life. Yes, I would like to go deeply in this idea of how the word of the poetry of the knowledge of humanity is in the word.
Well, the way, thank you very much. The way the ancient African people saw it was that if you want to learn about the world or society, you study nature. And this is the way they did it. That's where the natural knowledge comes from. And this is why the societies of Africa are so full of proverbs, because people observe. They can tell you what the lizard does. They can tell you what the ant does. They can look and tell you how the trees grow. And they do this because after thousands of years of watching, how nature produces things and creates things. So the notion of nature, the knowledge, it is not, she mentioned Spinoza, who's of course a European philosopher, but even long before Spinoza, African people have been observing the stars. They've been, and as Volney says, they've been naming the planets. So you think the only name, we talk about Jupiter and Saturn, the European gave those names. Africans already named them. But we don't know because we're living in this culture that basically has not only tried to erase every other culture, it has tried to eliminate knowledge from any other source. And this is what Trump is trying to do now by saying, let's close down these museums. You see, it's the same thing. Yes, sir.
Hello. I want to know what or who is an Arab, and can an Arab be an African?
Well, that's a good question. But the thing is, that's a good question. But when I'm using the word Arab, I'm talking about the people who don't want to be Africans. That's what I'm talking about. I've been to Egypt, as I said, about 14 times, and I've met a lot of Egyptians who say to me something like, I understand you're going to Africa after this. I said, well, I'm in Africa. They say, well, because they don't see themselves as Africans. You see what I'm saying? And so they have to describe what it is. I think that if you look it up, and I've looked it up a couple of times, there are people who originated in Arabia. And that's where it comes from. It's Arabia, people who see themselves as originating in Arabia. And they don't see themselves as originating in Africa. They would never tell you we originated in Africa. No, they originated in Arabia, and they conquered Egypt, and they have conquered parts of Sudan and other parts of Africa. So I think people have to self-declare. So I can't. I can look at this audience, and I don't know who is Arab and who is not Arab, but people self-declare. But I think that historically, what I'm talking about Arab intellectuals, the people like Wassim El-Sisi and Zahi Hawass. I've met Hawass, for example, and I know some of these people. El-Anani is trying to become the leader of UNESCO. He would be the first African person from the African continent since Imbo, who was the Senegalese, was the head of UNESCO. But if El-Anani believes the same thing as Hawass, and El-Sisi, then there's no reason for him to claim that he wants to be head of UNESCO and be the first African. He wants to be an Arab who is in charge of UNESCO, not an African. And they make these distinctions. That's why you have Egypt, for example, is a part of the Arab League. It's a part of the African Union, but it's also part of the Arab League. But Nigeria or Senegal or some of these other countries where you may have Muslims in them, they are still part of the African Union and not necessarily part of the Arab League. The Arab League is almost a racial thing, you see. Yes, sir.
Yeah, great question. Great lecture, Dr. Asante. Doing research on African insurrection and rebellion, we could only find one African Arab rebellion in the literature. Do you know of any other African rebellions against enslavement?
It would take you to ask me the hardest question in my life. So wow. No, that's a good question. The only one I know of is the same one you probably know, the one in the Zanj rebellion in 900 AD or so, which was again in Baghdad. But I that's the only one I know. But part of it, you have to understand what they did to Africans. The story, and we have never told this story as African people. The enslavement of Africans by the Arabs was brutal, and they made eunuchs. You captured young African boys and made eunuchs of all of them, hundreds of them, to serve in the harems of their mistresses. It was awful. These stories are in the text. They're in the books. We know this. We have forgotten, or we want to hide it. But this is what they did. The Europeans, they did a lot of things. They lynched us. They did cut off the genitals of people they lynched, but they didn't do what the Arabs did systematically. They hated Africans so much, it seems, that they simply made eunuchs of all the people that they would enslave. That is the history. They raped the African woman and then did the terrible history. It's a awful history. But we have to tell the story, because otherwise we will never cleanse our history, and we will never understand why we do what we do. We will know. But if you know your history and you read your history, you will say these people they have done, and that's why someone not having to revolt, there was probably no possibility of revolt. Let me just tell you one other thing. They have been attacking Anthony Browder as well. I should point that out. He did a big dig and excavation in Kemet, and I've been to his excavation site, and they stopped him from doing it because they thought African Americans were coming over there and bringing consciousness to the Black Egyptians. But we were not doing that. He was just doing his work. But part of the problem is that so many African people who wanted to revolt were basically killed. You could, and so it was a different brutality that existed in the in that Arab world against Africans. Yes, Doctor. Okay, sure. Yes.
Again, how you
Jay.
doing, Elder?
Thank you, Jay.
You said something that was very important, right? And it's profound, because what African people need to start identifying themselves as African people and stop using the word black.
Mhm.
You see what I'm saying? Because black tells you how you look, but it doesn't tell you who you are.
That's right. That's
You see
right.
what I'm saying? That's a very important
That's
thing. And Dr.
excellent.
Clark, as well as you and other scholars, have spoke on this.
Mhm. That's right.
So when they went over there, like he said, and they seen black people
Mhm.
hanging black people up there and fighting with black people,
Mhm.
you know what I mean? They identify
Yeah.
them in another way.
That's
because
right.
a white person, you can say he's a white person,
That's
but
right.
you don't know if he's French,
That's
German,
right.
or whatever. So you got to stop using
That's
that
right.
word.
Thank you.
Black.
Yeah.
You're not black.
Thank you.
Black doesn't have a culture, a land, or a history.
That's
it's
right.
a color.
Yes. Thank you,
color.
brother. Thank you, Brother Jay.
Period.
Thank you. Beautiful. I agree with that.
My question is, I'm a retired teacher,
Yeah.
and we had special books that we were only permitted to teach from.
Yeah.
So many of us got together, just like Imhotep
Yes.
started in
Yes.
Leeds School. We got
That's
together,
right.
designed our own program through those two brothers that lived in Germantown. I can't remember their names. But what I never understood was, why did they bring King Tut's body, take it all over the world to show people who he was? If you were really, really Arab, that's disrespectful. You wouldn't have done that.
That's true.
And I never understood that.
Well,
Why they always are digging and researching and trying to exhume. Well, they don't exhume them because they're in what, sarcophagus or whatever.
Sarcophagus.
They just dig and dig and dig because they can't find the answer they're looking for.
Well, part of it, as I said, part of it is commercialization. You know, it's part you want to say that I found this tomb, and you can come in here and pay money and go and do it and so forth. But you're right that normally you would think that disturbing the corpse is a disrespectful thing. You're perfectly right. Thank you. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Professor Asante, for that wonderful presentation.
Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you, sir. Thank you.
My concern is how we can bring this knowledge to the masses of our people, many of whom, if not most of whom, do not read books, do not attend lectures. Everybody has this, just about everyone has a cell phone in their pocket with a social media. I'm a proponent of our putting together 5-minute snippets of our history and culture and advertising and putting it into the eyes and ears of our young people and our older people. And I would really like to be a part of such an effort if there are others who think that this is important, especially now that it's, quote, been taken out of our schools. It hasn't really been appropriately in our schools in the first place. So I think we need to effectively use this technology, and I think it can make a tremendous difference.
Absolutely.
And once again, I thank you.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it so much, brother. Thank you so much. Okay, Dr. Dove.
Thank you very much, Dr. Asante. Wonderful.
Thank you.
And, you know, of course, how to make it available, the knowledge that you're giving us available to everybody is one of the biggest or most difficult.
Yes. Yeah. It's just, yeah.
But I wanted to touch upon
Brother Jay.
Brother Jay. And the point that he was making, because this is the way that we can tell whether people are Arabs or whatever, is relates to the culture and the belief in that culture. And if you practice a culture of hatred against Black people, particularly the darkest skinned people, that is what makes you an Arab. Or, you know, because of that belief, that cultural belief.
Yes.
And the European cultural belief, etc., very, very, very similar. The hierarchy of race, the belief in the inferiority, and so on, and the Brahmin religion, the same thing, and the apartheid, and what's happening here. You know, they all have a cultural orientation towards despising women and hating Black people,
Right.
particularly the Blackest woman, who
Yes.
is, you know, inferior in patriarchy and inferior in Blackness. And so we have to look at the culture, as you were saying, because how you behave, how you think, how you act in the world, that will tell us who you
Who
are.
you are. That's
You
good.
know, and we can go from there. So I just wanted to add that to everything that you're saying.
I appreciate that very much
Yeah,
because
exactly.
and-
The religion reflects the
Yes.
culture.
yes, and our people have always said you can say something, but it's how you act and how you behave that will tell you who you are. Yeah, that is right. Thank you so much. Yes,
Dr. Asante, I just want to thank you for that beautiful message.
thank you.
My name is Brother Maurice Ravel,
Mhm.
and me and my wife, we put our son through Imhotep High School. I heard you mention
Yes.
Imhotep.
Yeah.
And I knew some history coming up, but I didn't know the in-depth of history.
Yes.
And I was raised in a Christian home,
Mm-hmm.
but on my way in my development in African consciousness, my wife, she just passed away in October the 12th, 2024. And but she transitioned, so she's with the ancestors now. She was the one that awakened me to the knowledge of my aunt. I was not even aware, and I just started studying that.
That's beautiful.
And just by listening to John Henry
Yeah.
Clark, Anthony Browder,
Mhm.
your lecturers,
Mhm.
and all the Ben Yakinen.
Mhm.
And I met the brother right here at Hakeem Bookstore
Yeah.
just the other day. We were
Ha-
just having a
Oh,
good
boy.
time rapping.
Hakeem is still doing it.
But
That
the
is so
point I
great.
want to make is on my
Yeah.
way here, I explained to a sister where I was going at. And she said, well, let me ask you two things. What is your religion?
That's right.
And I said, wow. I said, this is where probably the friendship is going to end. I didn't want it to end.
That's right.
I said, I don't have any religion. I
That's
believe in the way of our ancestors.
Right.
So that struck a nerve. Then she said, but let me ask you this now. Do you accept Jesus Christ as your Lord and Savior? So I said to her, I said, I do not accept the Europeans' way of Christianity.
That's right.
That's where it blew up, and she didn't want to talk to me no more after that. So I want you to answer that for me. How do I just continue to handle it? Then she said she's going to pray for me that I don't go to hell.
Right.
Thank you.
Well, that shows you that her behavior shows you exactly her morality. You pray for you that you won't go to hell. Isn't that crazy? Just because no, the thing is that religion is a reflection of your culture, and people who whatever your religion is, what people do is they become. The thing is, people become this or that religiously because they think it will help them in one way or the other. That's the way people do that. We practice in this country Christianity. I grew up in what we would call a Christian family, or a family that went to church. All right, so we grow up in it because that's where we're born. If we were born in a Muslim country, we go to the mosque. If we were born in China, we go to whatever they do in China. You're born in this culture. You see what I mean? So I didn't grow up when I was 6 and 7 years old trying to figure out where do I go. My parents said, you're going to church. You know what I mean? So this is how we get it. I mean, and in our families, in African-American families, we have people in all kinds of religions. My grandson, and this is, I'll tell you a personal story. I hope he doesn't mind. And if he minds, he's my grandson, right? But my grandson, last year, he's young, he's a teenager, 14. He decides, this is my grandson, Molei Kete Asante's grandson. He decides that, you know what? I like the way the Muslims get up early in the morning for Ramadan and eat, and don't eat anymore all day, and then eat in the evening afterwards. And I had a talk with him, and I talked with my son, and my son said, "Dad, since he has been doing this, his grades have improved. He's disciplined. He's not distracted." I said, "Well, later on we could talk to him about the values of it, but right now that's good, useful." Look, for me, when I was 11 years old, should I reveal this? He said I should. When I was 11 years old, I was a preacher. I was a boy preacher. I was very good. I was very good till I was 17 or 18. And I said, "Oh no, I can't go here." You see what I mean? But it was good for me. It was a discipline. Any discipline is good for children. I don't take that away from. That's a good, later on people can learn and figure out, you know what, this is not right, or this is not what I'm going to do. And I'm hoping, the way we're trying to manage my grandson is to say, well, we have to let him explore this, because if we say no, he's going to go further in it. We let him explore. Once you explore and you begin to ask questions like I started asking, well, what's the role of women? How do they treat women? How do they treat this? How do they treat this? How do they treat Black people? What's going on in Sudan? Once you learn all that stuff, you say, well, wait a minute, I don't know what I can do that. But I think it's important for us to just not write people off because of their religion. I don't think that's a good thing. But you have to understand that people are searching, and I understand that. But you give as many facts as you can, and then you will come to the point, like I've come to the point, like the brother who just spoke. I come to the point and say, you know what? There's nothing greater than your own historical experiences. There's nothing greater than what your ancestors taught. Your ancestors taught just like everybody else. We have philosophers and saints and people. Well, we wouldn't call them saints, but we had sages just like everybody else. So that's what I search for. And I search for Africanness. And I want to be the best African. To be the best African I can be means that I'm the best human that I can be. That's exactly the way I see it. So, okay. Yes, one more.
Thank you, Doctor. I'm Olaniyan Adefumi, and I'm gonna take this to another direction almost. I was at either my mother's house or my house or someone's house, and I looked up the word Egypt in the dictionary. What does it mean? And I hated what I saw. Maybe you can describe what it is. That is that Egypt means land of the burnt sun. Can you explain that?
Well, yeah, that's a good question. The land of the burnt sun. Well, if that were the case, then almost every country where there's desert or sunshine would be the land of the burnt sun. I mean, but one of the things that the Europeans did very early, not the Arabs did this, but the Europeans did early, were trying to take the word Kemet, the word that I showed in the glyphs, to take those glyphs and say that those glyphs actually mean the earth, the black soil, the black land, the soil. That didn't mean Black people, black soil. But the thing that the language does, and I used to teach this language, and I may start having classes here again on the ancient Egyptian language, because it's a brilliant, beautiful language. When you see that circle, that allows you, it tells you how to interpret the rest of the glyphs. It gives you, it's like almost like a signifier. It says that it means this. For example, if it was going to say land, rather than have that circle that you see, I can't remember the technical name of that right now, but rather than have that, it would have two lines. Two lines would refer to the land, you see. But when you have circle, it means country or nation or city, you see? So, but those destinations are very, very critical. So I just think that what they're trying to do is get away from black. Yeah, but the word Kim is black. So that's the key. So we good? All right. We want to thank Gam, Brother Kareem. Thank you. He has a whole new system here, and it works, I believe. Yeah. So, Brother Bangalisa, did you talk to him? Okay, we got that straight. Okay, want to thank all the people who've come, and wherever you come from, we're so happy to have you. We call upon our ancestors far and near, the mother of our mothers, the father of our fathers, to render mercy and to bear witness for the liberation and the victory of all oppressed people forever. It is done. Thank you so much.